right, everybody, welcome to Phase 4. Phase 4 is our scripting phase, as it says right here. We are scripting. We're going to do some recording and do some production, but the foundation of the rest of our project is scripting and coming up with the ideas that we want to communicate to our audience. So we'll start with a quick write. Are you ready? Are you feeling nervous? What else do you feel like you need to know in order to do a good job with your podcast? This is not necessarily about your topic so much, although you can include that. This is, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Is there anything that you feel like you're going to need? All that kind of stuff. Let's reflect on what we've done so far. So, if you've been keeping up with your podcast journal, you've listened to at least 15 podcasts. You've read about how teenagers take action. You've researched different types of podcasts and different formats of podcasts. You've researched your topic. You've outlined and planned a podcast, and you've researched sound design. We've done a lot in those first 3 phases. So what can you use to help your research or your scripting? You can use your research. You can use your brainstorming. You can use your inspiration from podcasts you've listened to. All those things can be platforms for ideas. Jumping boards, springboards to get going. And you can also ask me for help. Now, I won't be around when you start doing this, but I will be around as we get it going and wrap it up. So, if you are doing an interview podcast or any other podcast, here is an example. On the left, for all of your formats, your outlines, we have how much time do you think these are going to take? And then we have our segment. We are breaking up our podcast into segments so you know how to organize the ideas you want to communicate. These are just example times, 17 seconds for each. If you didn't know, we have hours, minutes, and seconds. So we want to make sure we're planning things out, assuming how long we think things are going to take. So we have our introduction. We also have our first question. We have a segue. A segue is a transition. Our transition into our second question. Interview response, follow-up, interview response, follow-up, the next segue into question 3, final segue into our conclusion where we explain what we talked about and we do our call to action. Maybe you figured out a way to add music. So that's basic. That is our outline of our script. It's going to be a big chunk of it. Now you only need to pick one of the following because you're only doing one type of podcast format. These are your interview podcasts. Notice you can insert sounds from your sound design here wherever you think they fit. You should try to fill all of those up. The more sound you have, the more of an environment you're creating for your listener. Now here is your outline on this first slide. And then when you go to slide 6 and 7, you'll see that there's a lot more space to add more, right? Just more introduction, more words, more scripting, more ideas. So you've got space to add both, and we will turn it into a final script later. This is just an outline to begin with. If you're doing a solo podcast, same, very or similar format. You're talking about your first topic, your first point for your topic. You segue, transition into your second point about your topic, third, etc. Now, can you add more if you have 5 things you want to talk about? Of course. You can add more to here. You can add them to this next section. It's up to you. As you continue to see, if you're doing a co-host podcast, which I have to approve, same type of thing, but you introduce both co-hosts. You introduce your name, your co-host's name. Make sure the co-host and the host are talking, contributing equally. Again, more space on slides 12, 13. Panel podcast format. If that's what you're doing, you introduce all your panelists and yourself, bring up your main point, you give your panelists an opportunity to respond to each one. Remember, when you're doing a panel podcast, all of your panelists are together. You've got 4 different people in the same room. You're asking them the same question or giving them the same prompt, and each get a chance to respond and communicate with each other. Again, more space to write. Your nonfiction DocuPod is also here. This is where you're explaining a narrative for an event that actually happened. So you'll see that it's set up very much like a fiction story, but remember, this is all true information. You include your time, answer these questions. Who was involved? What happened first? What happened next? What happened last? Why is it important? Then you move on to your conflict. Who was involved? As long as you're answering these questions, we can turn this into a great podcast. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can type them as comments and I can answer them later. And remember, this has to be done before you leave for finals and your winter break. All right, everybody, good luck.